We are doing October 2021, paper 2. This is kind of a difficult paper as we discussed. So let's start and try to solve as much as possible. We'll only be looking at the pseudocode questions like we discussed before. All right. So I'm skipping some of the easier ones and we'll only do the more technical parts of it. So in the first question, they're saying, complete the following table by writing the answer for each row. The number of dimensions in this array. So number of dimension means if it is a 1D array, then 1 dimension. If it is a 2D array, then 2 dimension, as in rows and columns. Then they're saying the technical term for the minimum and maximum values that the variable
Sir,
1. Thank you. So the technical terms for minimum and maximum values that the variable n may take. So this would always be the lower bound or the upper bound. This means the lowest number of values that you can store or the maximum number of values you can store. The technical term for the variable n in the pseudocode statement, this is always the index and the position at which you store a value in the array. Okay, then we have to convert this character into a number, and for that we'll need to go to the insert document. So for this we use the function ASC, the ASCII function, which will convert this into the ASCII value. So I'll just wrap this in ASC. Then there is a string value that is being multiplied by 2 and then it's converting it to 54. So how can we do that? So 27 into 2 is basically 54. So then we have to convert this string to number. So we use string to num, which will convert 27 into an integer value. Then we have 27 divided by something that will lead to being 3. So 27 divided by the way, you have to remember in these questions, the calculation is very basic. So never overcomplicate it. So 27 divided by 2, that would give us 13.5. But this is 13, so I need to convert this into int. So it becomes 13. And now we have a function that starts with the string and has 3 parameters. Okay, there's only one 3-parameter function in your syllabus. And you should remember this for ease in the exam. Okay, so this is the mid function. So without even thinking, you can just put the mid function here. So from abstraction, we have to get subtract. Okay, so sub is already part of another string. So after sub, we have to get this part out, tract. And for this, we have to count the number of characters.
सर हम ये जो थर्ड पार्ट है इसमें इंटीजर की जगह से हम एक और इंसर्ट में था मुझे भूल गया मतलब कुछ और भी यूज कर सकते
All right. So we have to get this tract out. So we'll count the number of characters. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts from 4. So I'll write 4 here. And then tract has how many characters? It has a total of 4 characters. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll just write 5 here. So this will get tract out and then it will combine it or join it with sub and then it would become subtract. These are very simple Boolean values. Okay, this is a flowchart question. I'm skipping this. This is a very elementary level question. So we can discuss this afterwards. Again, theory, skipping this. Okay, we move on to the difficult part now. Question number 3. In the question number 3, we are supposed to create an array of records. So they're saying the program is writing a program to help manage clubs in a school. Data will be stored about each student in a school and each student may join up to 3 clubs. The data is held in a record called student. And then these are all the records. Write the pseudocode to declare the record structure of type student. Okay, so we have 5 properties, string, and then the rest of the values are all integers. So we have to make it accordingly. So I'll write type student. Then we have end type. Again, you can write it in lowercase or uppercase. It is totally up to you. Inside indented, we'll write declared. The values are student ID, email, club 1, 2, 3. Declare student ID as string. Declare email as string. Declare club 1, 2, 3. Okay, club 1 as integer, and I'll just copy this, paste it twice. Club 1, 2, and 3. This is it. So this is the complete part. Okay, now in the next part, they're saying that we have to create, there's a 1D array called membership containing 3000 elements. of student, so you have to declare the membership array. Very simple, you have to use the same array declaration. We'll write declare membership. Again, this is all given in the pseudocode guide document. You cannot go wrong with this, otherwise you lose mark. So it will go from 1 to 3000, and then you have to write the type, which is of type student, and the student is this data type record, and then every index will have 5 properties each. Some of the elements of the array will be unused. Give appropriate way of indicating an unused array element. Okay, let's go for a value that cannot be existing if the student is actually there. So if the student is there, student ID will not be empty, right? Or their clubs will not be set to, let's say, -1, because the range is 1 to 99. So you can just say that. You can say set the student ID to empty string, or you can say set club 1, 2, 3 all to -1. Some students are members of less than 3 clubs. State one way of indicating an unused club. Okay, so we've already answered that here actually. So the number is 1 to 99. We can just write here that any club number outside the range of 1 to 99. Next part, the procedure ID. Get ID will prompt and input the number of a club. Output the student ID of all the students who are the members of that club. Output a count of all the members in the given club. All right, now how do we do this? So they're saying you have to get the input of the club. So the club will either be club 1 or club 2 or club 3. Then based on that, you will prompt the student ID of all the students who are members of that club, and then you will output. So you just have to, for this club 1 or 2 or 3, just have to output all the students of that club, and you also have to count how many students they were in total. Very simple. We'll try to do this now. This is part D. The procedure is called get IDs. So procedure get IDs. Then we have end procedure. We'll leave space for declaration here. And then in the next part, they're saying that you have to input the number of a club. So we'll ask the user to output, enter a club number, and we'll store that in a variable. Let's call it input club now, or you can just call it club number, whatever you want. Then the question says that you have to count. So we are going to set the count to 0. Okay, now there are a total of 3000 values as we were told above. So we have to iterate the array 3000 times, and they have not mentioned to make it efficient. So it's completely fine. We can do it using a for loop. For I 1 to 3000, next I. Okay, now every time we have to check if the current club that we inputted 1 or 2 or 3, if which club is it, right? So if it is either 1 or 2 or 3, and depending on that, we will then count. So we'll write if the club number that the user entered if the club number that the user entered is equal to membership array I dot club dash 1. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm checking the club number. Let's say if I inputted 2, then membership. So how would the array look like? In fact, let's actually make this array. So this is the membership array, and then it will have multiple indices, and at each index, let's say this is index 0, at index or maybe index 1, it will have 5 properties. It will have student ID, email, club 1, 2, 3. Yes, so going back, so at index 1, maybe this could be student ID, student 1. Then they could have some email at gmail.com, and then there would be some values for club 1 and 2 and 3. Let's say this is maybe 12, 15 and 16 or 17. right? So against this club ID that we are inputting, we are looking for club number. So if the club number is 2, so we're checking if the membership dot club 1. What is the value here? It is 12. So we're looking for that. We're checking if it is club 1 or club 2 or club 3. So whatever the value is stored here, it would be either 1, 14, 27, any value between 1 to 99. If that is the case, then we are going to count this. Similarly, at the second index, we'll have some student 2. They could have some email at Hotmail, and then they'll also have some IDs 15, 19, 33. So then it's if you input the cloud number as 17, so we are going to compare and we're going to check, is it equal to 17? Is it equal to 17? Is it equal to 17? So any student can be a member of up to 3 clubs. That is what the question says. And that is what we're looking for. We are looking for if they are part of any appropriate club number. And this is what we have inputted here. If the example is clear, I'll just get rid of this. So if the club number that the user inputted is equal to the membership or the value of club 1 for this student, or the second possibility could be that the club number that you inputted, if a student belongs there, or the club number 2, or for club number 3, if the student membership index I dot club number 3 like this. If any of these conditions are true, then we are going to set the count to +1, and then they have said in the question that we are supposed to output a count of all the students in the given club. So we will output the student ID by writing membership current I dot student ID. So whatever number is inputted, it will go through all of the students one by one, and then it will check if the club number matches, and then it will output all the students in that specific club, and then we'll do end if, and then we'll do next I. अच्छा, यहाँ तक कोई मसला नहीं आप लोगों को? अब्दुल्ला, मूसा, दोनों ने इसी तरह ही किया था?
यस सर कहते हैं इस तरह किया था
ठीक है, मूसा.
So I have a question. That why did you write dot?
So
Dot.
that is not the sort of question you should be asking, 1 month before the exam. The answer is that this is of a record data type, right? जब आपके पास एक record data type आप create करते हो like this, so you cannot access all the values at once. Instead, what you have to do is you have to use the dot operator. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि देखो हर array के index के ऊपर 5 properties इस तरह से पड़ी हुई होंगी. So if you need to access this property, you need to name it. So membership ID, membership index 1, which is the whole thing, and then from this whole thing you need one value, so you have to write the name, either student ID, either email, etc.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Okay. Then in the next part we have question number 4. So in the question number 4 we have this pseudocode here, and we are supposed to give some simple answers. Okay, they're saying complete the following table by giving the answers using the given pseudocode, a line number containing a variable being incremented. Okay, so you guys know this, right? This is increment, this is increment, this is increment. You can write any of these here. It could be line number 19. Let's see. Type of a loop structure. Okay, so here we have a while loop. Now you cannot write this just as a while loop. While loop is exactly called a preconditional loop. So you have to use the exact words, preconditional loops. Then the number of functions used. So these are referring to the library routines that you might have used. We have the length, we have the mid, we have the string to num. And that does not mean that you're going to count these functions as well. Let's say if this had been a function, so you won't count this. We are strictly talking about the library routines when we're talking about the functions used here. So that would be 3. Then the number of parameters passed to string to num. So let's see how many parameters have been passed. So this whole thing is just one parameter. Okay, this is intentionally there to confuse you. This will return one output against the mid, and then this whole would be replaced by one value, maybe let's say 2. So this would be the parameter 2 here. So this is one. The name of procedure other than check. So there is a procedure check here. Now there is another call of procedure which is called result. So we'll just write result here, and this will complete our question. Then we have, they're saying this pseudocode can be improved using 3 features. Okay, this is again very simple. You guys know this. So meaningful identifier names. Then we have white space, and then keywords being capitalized. And you can also write about comments, and you can also write about indentation. Simple. Okay, the loop structure in the pseudocode is not the most appropriate one. So a more appropriate loop structure. Okay, so here we have a loop structure that is going from index 1 till the length of string. So whenever we have, in any case, whenever we have the string length or the number of iterations known, we can always just use the count control loop. So we'll just use a count control. And again, you cannot write for loop here. Okay, for loop is not the technical name. You have to write count control loop here. And then once you have written that, justification for it, and the justification for it would be that the length of, what is in string? In string is the length, yes. So the length of in string is already known and does not need a condition to end. So we'll know it could either be 10, 5, 17, 18, etc. So a count controlled or simply a for loop would be fine, but you cannot write for loop here. The appropriate loop structure is now used. The appropriate loop structure is now used. 2 lines of pseudocode are changed and 2 lines are removed. Write the right line numbers that are removed. Okay, so if we are changing the loop structure, then that means which 2 values do we not need. So in this while loop, what is being used? So we have the loop variable here called index. So we will take away line 15. And then we are also incrementing index here in line 23. So we'll take line 23 away as well. So we will write the answer is line 15 and line 23. This will get you 1 mark. Okay, again to more difficult questions now. So a company has several departments. We will again try our best to visualize the problem first before we even write a single line of code, so we don't do any mistakes once we start writing. The company has several departments, and then we are supposed to create text files for this question. Each department stores the name, email, and the status of each employee in its own text file. All the text files have the same format. Employees are stored as 3 separate data strings on 3 consecutive lines of file. An example of this would be name, email, status, name, email, status. Okay, again, let's visualize. So let's say if we have a file here, we have name, we have the name, let's say Goku, and then Goku, then email address and employee status. So email maybe something at gmail.com, and then status would be employed or maybe contract. Then there could be another character, maybe Neo, and then they would have some email at hotmail.com, and then this could be full time. And then there is no line in between. Okay, so 3 lines for each person. First 3 lines, then the next set of 3 lines, so on and so forth. So the question is saying now you have to write the procedure make file that will take 3 parameters: an existing file name, a new file name, and a search status value. Okay, so let's make this header procedure make new file, which will take 3 parameters, all strings, an existing file name. Let's call it current file. Then we have to make a new file, so let's call it new file, and then they're saying the search status value. So maybe let's call it search, maybe search value, and this would all be string and no and other thing procedure. Okay, by the way, we left declaration here, so we should also do that quickly. This would be declare club num as integer, and I also as an integer because it's a for loop variable, and then count is also an integer, and that's it. That's all what we've used. Okay, going back, so in this, now we have to make new file. Okay, now let's see what the question is saying. Create a new text file using the new file name. Okay, write all the employee details to the new file where the employee status is not equal to the search status value. Okay, what does this mean now? Let's say if I write a main here, again we are just trying to understand the problem first. When I call the make new file and the current file, I say file A and the new file is file B, and the search value is maybe contract. So let's add a couple more characters. Maybe we have Lisa here, her email ID, and she's also on contract. And then other character here, maybe Ash, and then he is on full time. Okay, now the search value that I pass in here is contract. So the question is saying that you will write all the to the new file where the employee is not equal to the search value, which means if this is file A, let's assume that this is file A, or let's call it the current file.txt. What we have to do is that in the new file.txt, we will only copy the values, all three values where the contact does not match. So is this person on contract? Yes. Is new on contract? No. So I'm going to copy new and I'm going to put them in the new file. Is Lisa on contract? No. Is Ash on contract? Lisa is on contract, but Ash is not. So I'm going to place Ash in the new file. Count the number of sets of employees that were in the original file, count the set of employees that were written to the new file, produce a summary of the output. Okay, this is a bit complicated question. This is of 7 marks. What we have to do here is that we have to read 3 lines at a time. And then based on the reading of the third line, we have to check if it is matching with the value that we passed in the parameter. If it does not match, then I'm going to write all the 3 lines, line 1, line 2, line 3, into the new file. This is what we have to do. So far, this is the visualization. Now we'll start writing the program. So like I said, we have to read 3 lines. And then based on the value in the third line, which is the status, we will decide either to write all the 3 lines that we've read or not into the new file. First, let's of all, we'll go and open the files and we'll leave space for declaration as always. And they're saying that we also have to count 2 values, the number of sets of employees that were in the original file and then the ones who were written to new. So let's call it current count, which is set to 0, and the new count, which is also set to 0. We're going to open the file now, open file, the current file for read, and then open file, the new file for write, because we're going to be writing them and separately. So close file, current file, and close file, new file. Again, always make sure that you close the files, otherwise you will lose marks. Okay, now we have to loop till the end of file. So repeat until the end of file of the current file has been reached. Until end of file is equal to true, or you can just write it like this. Okay, as long that is not the case, we are going to read 3 lines from the file in order to get the set of the employee completely, like we discussed, right? So let's do this. Repeat, we're going to read a line using read file. Then we have the current file and we'll store it in. So what are the names of the properties? We have the name, email, and status. So let's store it in name. Then read file, current file, store it in email, and then read file, current file, and store the third line in status. Okay, once this is done, we will count this as one employee in the file. We'll say that the current count would be equal to the current count plus 1, because this is, we have read one employee completely. Okay, now we'll decide. So like the question says, if the status does not match with the search value. So with whatever the search value is, let's say if it is contact, if the person is not on contact, we are going to add them into the new file. Just an example, which is stored in contact. So now I'm going to check if the search value or if the status does not match with the, let's call it target status. So it is more meaningful, okay, instead of current value. So if the target is not equal to the, if the status is not equal to the target status, if that is not the case, then we are going to, so we are using these dummy values. We have old.txt, new.txt, and contact. So old gets copied into current file, new gets into new file, and contact gets copied into target status. And then when we have read 3 lines, so we are checking these 3 lines and we check if the third line matches with the target status or not, or does the status match or not. So since this person is on a contact, we are not going to write them into the new file, but since this person is full time, we are going to write them into the new file. That is what I'm doing. So if they do not match, I'm going to then have to write them into the new file. So I'll say write file into the name of the file is new file, and I will write the name first, then write file into new file the email, and then write file into the new file the status of the person, which means again Goku will remain, new 3 lines get copied, and then Ash 3 lines get copied because the values were not matching. And then since we copied this, we have to count this as a new employee. So new count, or the new value that was copied, so new count is equal to new count plus 1, just like we did here above for the current employee. So we did it one for the new employee, and then we'll do end if, and then the loop will end. Once the file's closed, now the question says that you just have to output the summary. File marketing, which is the name of the department, I believe. Okay, no, it's file, then marketing. This is the name of the old file, contained 54 employee details. This is the current count. Then 52, this is the new count, set of employees were written to the new file. This is the name of the new file. So let's output it this way. Output, we have the file will go literally, then marketing. Marketing is the name of the current file, so I'll write current file without the quotation marks, contained, and how many values contained? 54 employee details. Contained how many values it contained? It contained current count, whatever the value is, employee details. This would go in one line, and then in the second line they are saying 52 employees were of sets of details were written to the file. So employee details were written to the file. Now the name of the file would be stored in the new file. So I'll just bring new file here, and then this count will be stored in the new count, which is the number of employees that were written into the new file. And this completes the question. Then they're asking, okay, let's just finish this, then I'll take questions. An alternative format. An alternative format could be used for storing the data. Text files still be used. Describe the alternative format. Okay, so here we are storing them in 3 separate lines. A much more convenient way would be to store them on the same line. An example of this could be that you can separate them on the basis of some separator. So neo, and then you can have some sort of maybe a hashtag, and then the email, and then the hashtag, like this. So use something that does not appear in the string. So we can store them all on the same line. Store all 3 items on same line using a separator. Then they're asking for the advantages and disadvantages. So the advantage will be that here we have to read 3 lines at a time, right? So there's like multiple functions, but in that case there would be fewer operations needed to be done on the file and its items. And then the disadvantage would be, now the one, like I said, that you have to come up with a separator that should not appear in the string. So if the hashtag appears in the email, then it will wrongly split the value. So that could be one reason, which means that it would be, you can say, separator, possibility of separator being part of the string, causing, you can say, the extraction to become complex, right? So you can write anything of this sort and you will get full marks. Now moving to question 6. All right, now on to question number 6. This is going to cause some trouble. This is a bit complex question. Hopefully you guys will be able to understand it. All right, so the question says that the mobile phone has a touch screen. The screen is represented by a grid. There are 800 rows and then 1280 columns. I'll keep writing this stuff down so we don't get confused at any point. In question 6, we have 1280 rows and we have 800 columns. Yes, 1280 rows. Okay, in fact, it should be 1280 columns and 800 rows. The grid is represented by a 2D array called screen of type integer. An array element will be set to 0 unless the user touches the part of the screen. Okay, so if the part is untouched, the value is 0. If cell untouched, then value is equal to 0. Okay, many array elements will end up being setting to 1 by the single touch of a finger or a stylus. Okay, the following diagram shows a simplified touch screen. The dark line represents a touch on the screen. All the grid elements that are wholly or partly inside of the outline will be set to 1. Okay, so even this value that we're looking at, this cell that is partially in the boundary, is still set to 1. This is also set to 1. So even there is some part of it that is touching the surface area of the finger, it will get set to 1. So this is the idea of the question. The element shaded represents the black center point of the touch. So we have these rows and columns, and here we have the center. A program is needed to find the coordinates, the row and the column of the center point. The center point on the diagram shown is row 6, column 11. We can see it's labeled as well. The user can only touch one area at a time. The screen rotation does not affect the touch screen. The program has decided to use global values like center row and center column as coordinate value for the center point. So global means you are not supposed to declare them. Okay, now we are given the program has started to define the program modules as follows. Okay, so these are all what we call the helper functions. Okay, so these are all the helper functions, which means we must use them to get full credit. Okay, you have to use all of them where applicable, and you will always assume that they are 100% working. So you don't have to implement them on your own. Write efficient pseudocode for the module first row set. Okay, now what is first row set? Okay, let's see what we have to do here. We have to write first row set. Okay, here they are telling you to use the 4 modules. Okay, in the first part they have not asked us to, so we will refrain from using them. Okay, so first row set, what we have to do is that we have to search for the first row that has an array element set to 1. Return the index of that row and return -1 if there are no elements set to 1. Okay, this is what we have to do. So how do we start? In this case, what we're going to do is, so this is how real life touchscreen works as well. It is constantly checking for an input constantly. So what we'll do is we'll start from this starting point 1, 1, the 1 row and 1 column, and then we'll go through all the columns one by one, and we'll keep on checking if at any point the value is equal to 1. Then we do for the same row second, then we do it. Okay, as soon as we see any value that is being set to 1 by the touch, that means that we have found the first row at any point in the screen where some touch has been placed, some stylus has been placed, some finger has been placed. As soon as you find it, your search will stop. So you are not going to proceed from this point onwards. Again, the question is only asking you to search for the first row that has an array element set to 1. So this 2D array here, it's just given to confuse you, because in very simple terms, you have to go through the whole 2D array and you have to look for a 1. And once you find the 1, you have to stop searching. It's a linear search essentially. That is just disguised inside this complex 2D array grid question of a mobile phone. Okay, let's start this. Question number 6, part A. So we have the function first row set, which will return an integer, and we have the end function. Okay, and we'll leave space for declaration. All right. So we have to make it efficient, which means that we have to use only a conditional loop here. It could either be repeat until, or it could either be while, not for loop. So I'll use the repeat until, and we have to use the same mechanisms. By the way, this is a function here, okay? So we can also use a for loop here and use return statement. Again, what does return do? Return will terminate the function once the condition is met. So the whole module will stop working, including all the loops. So this is the advantage. Whenever you have a function, you can actually just use a for loop and you can use the return keyword inside. Otherwise, you'll have to use a for loop or a while. So I'll keep your life simple and I will use a for loop here. But let's say, since they've used the word efficient, let's actually stick to while or repeat until. You never know, essentially. I think if you open the marking scheme, they might have given marks for a conditional loop. So we can do it using both for and while. In fact, let's do it using both for and while loop. So let's do it first in the more difficult way, that is the repeat until or the while loop. So we have the row, we are setting it to 1 because we eventually have to return the row number. Again, row is this one, okay, the horizontal one. Okay, now till what point are we going to repeat? We are going to repeat until row becomes greater than 800. There are a total of 800 rows. So if we have seen all the rows, and that would mean that no contact has been made on the screen. So until row becomes greater than 800 or the value has been found. Okay, or you can say maybe touched. So if touched becomes equal to true, that means we have found the value that we're looking for, and then we'll initially assume that touched is initially false and that no connection has been made with the screen yet. Okay, with this in mind, now this is a 2D array, right? So in the 2D array, it means we have to go through all the columns as well. So every row and every column. And inside here, we can. All right, so we will repeat it for all the columns. And at any point, if the outer loop if the condition becomes true, then the outer loop stops, which means inner loop stops as well. So we don't need to make inner loop using a repeat until or a while loop. We can just use a for loop here. So for column is equal to 1, 2. So there are 1280 columns and we'll go to every column. Okay, now we'll get the current cell. Let's call it cell. And the name of the array is equal to is screen. So at the current row and the current column of screen, I'm going to get the value, which would either be 0 or 1. And I'll check if the value of this cell is 1. Again, if we start from row 1, column 1, this is the cell that we're referring to. Then we are going to this cell, then third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, so on and so forth. So we have to keep all of this in mind, not to so that we don't make a mistake. If cell is equal to 1, then we are going to first of all claim that the screen has been touched. So we'll make it true. Why are we making it true? So this loop can end, and once this loop ends, so the whole thing ends. Touch would become true. And then we also need to, what do we need to output? We need to just return the index of that row. Okay, so we will say touched is equal to true, and we'll do end if. And we can also so we just set it to true and then we go out. Okay, so if at any point touch becomes equal to true, we already have the row number and that we are keeping, and we will increment the row every time. So we will say row is equal to row plus 1. So when this condition becomes true, we'll already have the row number here, so we can just output the row number here. So once the loop ends, we can then check if the screen was either touched or not. So if it was touched, then we will return the row number. And if the touch remained false, which means the screen was never touched, so in that case, they're saying that we have to return -1. So let's do that. If touched remain false throughout, then we are going to return -1. Else, if the screen was touched at any point, we will return the value of the row. But there is one catch here. Let's say the screen was touched at row number 3. But once you exit this inner for loop, it will change the row to +1. So let's say the current row was 3 and 3 plus 1 becomes equal to 4. So essentially, when the touch was when it happened in here, in somewhere in the row 3, you are saying now move to row 4. So it will miscalculate the row number, right? So when we return the value, we essentially just have to return row -1 so that we can undo this +1 that was done inside to go to the next row. So this is the while loop method again, or the repeat until. What did we do? We repeat for all the rows until rows become greater than 800 or when the screen has been touched. Then inside the loop, we go through all the columns. If any cell is equal to 1, then we set the touch to true. And then every time we are checking if at any point the screen has been touched, then we will stop, or if the number of rows have exceeded, and then continue. Now this was the lengthier method and something that you're more accustomed to. Now let's do it using a for loop because we have the return keyword available to us, so it makes our life easy. I'll just get rid of all of this. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll start for row 1 to 800, and then we'll go to for each column 1 to 1280, and then I'll get the cell value. So that is screen, current row, and current column. Now I'll check if the cell is equal to 1, then instantly I can just return the row number. Let's call them with the same variables that we're using, row, and this should be column. This also becomes column. Okay, so if at any point the value of the cell is 1, return row. Now what will return row do? It will instantly terminate the whole function, which means that when we are calling this first row set, and then when I'm getting the row here out, so I can just print the value of row here, and it will be, let's say, maybe row number 92, like this. So I can just directly instantly end the whole thing. Okay, if that is not the case, if the value of the cell is not equal to 1, you are not going to return -1 here instantly. That is equal to saying you are checking, okay, is this row equal to 1? No, since this cell is not equal to -1, then it cannot exist further. So we'll just return -1. This assumption is wrong. We can only return -1 when we have seen the whole array, and we have only seen the whole array once we have ran the whole for loop, nested for loop. So once the whole for loop runs and is completed, only then we will return -1. What does this mean now? Again, if at any point we get 1, we return the row number, this whole thing ends. But if you have run the whole for loop, nested for loop, and you have gone through all the cells in the 2D array, still it never returned any row number. So now we return -1 because there is no other possibility except the fact that the screen has not been contacted yet, and then we are going to return -1. So you can see this keeps the whole thing much simpler than the logic above. So it's totally up to you, whatever you guys want to use. Okay, now on to part B. In part B, they're saying describe a feature of your solution that indicates the pseudocode represents an efficient algorithm. Okay, so we have done it both ways. We have used this loop condition here and a conditional loop that will end, and we've also used the return keyword. So you can write either of these. You can say that we return the value and terminate, we return the value of row as soon as we find a cell with value 1, which instantly terminates the function and finishes the program. So this will get you 2 more. Or if you want to write it for the repeat until, so for that you can write that we are exiting the loop as soon as we find a cell with value 1, something like this. Then they're saying the programmer, now in the next part, the programmer decides to produce a single search module, find set, which will be able to perform each of the individual searches performed by the first four modules in the table outline the changes needed to convert one of the existing modules into the single module. Okay, now what are these four modules? They have first row set, last row, first column, last column. Okay, so we are looking for the points where the contact was made on the first row, last row, first column, and last column. They're saying that we want to convert one of the existing module into the single module. Okay, so we want to put all of that in a single module. So what do we have to do? Okay, now the changes that we'll have to do is that we'll have to make sure that all the search functionality from the original four modules is included in the new singular module, right? So if we are looking for the first row and the last row and the first column and the last column, we need to make sure that when we are making a single module, let's call it find set, then it should have all the properties of all the four modules, so we can call it from one place. This will get you 1 mark. Now the second mark would be that the new module that we have will, the singular module must be able to store the four coordinates of each module, which means the last, the first column, and the last and first row, right? So if there are supposed to be four values, so your module must be able to either return them or store them in the same place. That will get you 2 marks. You have one possible advantage and one possible disadvantage of combining the four into a single module. Okay, so when you do a lot of stuff in one module, obviously it's going to increase your complexity. So you can write that it will be more complex, hence difficult to debug. And then the advantage would be that you can just make changes in one module. So make changes in one module instead of separate ones. One module like this. Okay. Right. Okay, so with this done, we move on to the final part of the question. Okay, now something interesting that you should have noticed by now is they are going to ask you to find the center point. Get the center point, calculate the coordinates of the center point by using these models. First row, first column, last column. Assign the values to center and the center column and set center row to -1 if no screen touch is detected. Okay. How do we get this? Initially, it might look a bit tricky, but it's actually very simple because the helper function is going to do everything for you. Now, this is the first row that we make contact here. So this is 1, 2, and 3, right? This is the first row where we've ever made contact on the screen. This will be returned to us. Then they're saying first column. Okay, this is going to be the first column where the contact was made. So 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. This will also be returned to us. Okay, we have these. Then the last row, this is the last row, which is basically 7, 8, 9. And then the last column is this column, which is 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, now you have all the four values. So for on the x-axis, you have the values 7 and 15, and on the y-axis, you have values 3 and 9. Now, how do we find the center point? This is like literally simple math. So you have to find the mid x. So you just have to add them and divide them by 2. So 15 plus 7 divided by 2. And the mid y is also going to be equal to 9 plus 3 divided by 2. So what do we get? So when we have 15 plus 7, that is 15 plus 7 would be 24, I think, 22. So 22 divided by 2 is 11. So we get this 11 here. This is the mid x. Okay, and then we have 9 plus 3 divided by 2, which is 11, which is 12 divided by 2, which is equal to 6. So we get 6 here. So now we have to find the intersection of these points. If I go to the intersection, we find this center spot. This is the logic. Again, looks very complicated when you read the question, but it's intuitive math if you can just get the hang of it. Let's write the pseudocode now. They're saying you have to write the module. Oh, so they're saying It's a module, which means it can either be function or procedure, so it's up to you. We can maybe just keep it a procedure unless we want to return value. So procedure get center and procedure. Okay, so calculate the coordinates of the center point, use all the modules. Okay, they're saying set the center row to -1 if no screen touch is detected. How do we know no touch is detected? We already saw that using the first row set. It will return -1 if there are no elements set at any row, right? So we can just call that directly because we just implemented it. It will go through the whole grid literally and will return -1 after that. So let's call it first of all. Let's call it the first row. The first row will call the first row set. So it will return you a value. Now, if this first row value is already equal to -1, then it means that the center row value will also be set to -1. Where did I get this center row variable from? This is already given in the question. They have told us that you have to use these two variables, center row and center column. So that is what I'm doing. Okay. If that is not the case, or the other thing you can do is you can just already set it to -1 and reassign it if at any point you find something on the screen. Up to you. Okay, now and if. Okay, in else part, now we're going to get, so we have the first row. Let's get the first column. First column is equal to first column set. We just literally have to call these modules now. So first column set is called and first row set is called. Then we have to call the last row. So this would be, what was it called? Last row set. So this will be last row set, and then the last column will be last column set, like this. So we have all the 4 calls here. Now we just have to find the mid, and as we discussed the math, we just have to use that. So center row will be reassigned here, and center column will also be reassigned here. Okay, what will be reassigned to? So the mid of the center row would, so how do we find the center row? So we have to do first row plus last row, and we simply divide it by 2. Similarly, we have center column, which will be last column or first column plus the last column divided by 2. And since division can lead to real values, we don't need real values, we need integer values. So we'll convert this whole thing into an int like this. And with this, the whole question is literally complete. It's very simple. Just you have to comprehend this question to get these full 6 marks. Right? So that's it. We have to do declaration here as well, by the way, in both the parts, but I'm guessing you guys can do that.